So people are outraged, as they should be, over the Supreme Court's decision overruling Roe v. Wade. But some people have taken to blaming Joe Biden? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So I remember back when I was practicing law, I represented an older woman who had raised children by herself, not receiving any child support from a deadbeat dad. Years later, when the deadbeat dad starts getting Social Security starts actually withholding some of it to give to her, to help pay her back some of the child support she never received. Well, he then proceeded to take her to court to stop this child support from being withheld. Well, fortunately, my friend had a good lawyer, me, to go with her, and I looked up the law, and it turns out the law is pretty clear on this point, that a certain percentage of Social Security can be withheld to pay her back the child support that she never received, but that the amount that she could receive is slightly less than what was currently being withheld. Well, as it turns out, she had child support orders from 2 separate counties, so we had to go to 2 separate courts to resolve this issue. In the first court, the judge was very sympathetic. I presented what the law was, the judge agreed with me, and basically entered an order stating that the child support would be withheld at the level that is required under the law. Now, while my friend was satisfied with that, she still somehow didn't really feel that she had gotten the justice that she deserved. And truthfully, it's hard to say that she did. After all, really what she deserved was to get the child support she should have gotten back when she was raising the children. Then when we went to the hearing in the other county, the judge looked at my friend's deadbeat baby daddy and excoriated him for 10 minutes, talking about how he was irresponsible and how it's ironic for him to cry these crocodile tears when he wasn't there while she was raising the children, and how having the money withheld from Social Security is the least that can be done for all the sacrifices that my friend had to make to raise these children that he abandoned. Then that judge ended up entering an order that said the exact same thing as the other county, because that's what the law was, and the judge was right. Now, what really struck me about this case, though, is that when we left that hearing in the second county, and I thought to myself, okay, well, we got the same thing that we did in the other county, my friend was thrilled. She felt like justice had finally been served. She felt like her pain and troubles had finally been recognized. And while I was a little taken aback by that reaction, I was glad to see that she felt that way. Because it's true, she had been a wonderful mother and had sacrificed for years with no support from the father to raise her children, and really, this is the least that could be done, considering all the sacrifices and difficulties she had endured as a result of his callousness and irresponsibility. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is because the recent reaction of some abortion rights activists to the recent ruling of the Supreme Court strikes me as very much the reaction of my friend to the first court. To be fair, the vast majority of abortion rights activists are directing their anger at the correct place, which is the Supreme Court, the Republicans in the state legislatures and in Congress, who are either passing anti-abortion legislation or who are blocking legislation from passing that would protect abortion rights, and the few people like, say, Joe Manchin and Susan Collins, for example, who claim that they were duped by Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings when he pledged that he would not support overturning Roe v. Wade, and yet who are unwilling to do something about the filibuster to address this. Those are the 3 groups we should be mad at right now, probably in that order. The one person who definitely doesn't belong on that list, though, is Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris for that matter, or Nancy Pelosi, or Chuck Schumer, or any of the other Democrats, many of whom I've been very critical of at times for not being aggressive enough about things. And yet I am hearing people complain about them, saying that Democrats press the White House for a more assertive response to Roe's fall. That's a headline from the New York Times that I'll link to down below. Or there's another article that one of my Facebook foils posted that says, Harris says White House not discussing use of federal land for abortion care. And again, I'll also post that link down below. But the truth is, the president really doesn't have the power to address any of this. And in terms of addressing the issues in any kind of substantive way, we just don't have the votes to do it. As long as Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are unwilling to change the filibuster rule, and it appears that's how they remain, there's no way we can pass anything through Congress. Let's just consider some of the options that are being presented here. For example, one option I've heard about is to open up abortion clinics on federal land. Now that seems appealing, but the reality is just because the abortion is committed on federal land, that will not stop the states from prosecuting the doctors and the women who get the abortion. And it's important to remember that physicians are licensed by the states. So if the state licensing agencies decide that doctors performing abortions are violating the law, they can take away their licenses. It'll make no difference if those abortions are held on federal land or not, in other words. Let's talk about some of the other suggestions that AOC has made. One would be to restrain judicial review. Well, I actually think that's an interesting idea. As I pointed out to my wife the other day, judicial review, the process by which courts will say a certain piece of legislation is constitutional or not, is actually not in the Constitution. It dates back to an 1803 case called Marbury versus Madison. And it was in that case that Chief Justice John Marshall wrote, quote, "It is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is." That statement is where the whole idea of judicial review comes from. Ironically, the ruling implicitly acknowledged the fact that the court itself has no power to enforce those rulings, which is true. All it said is the court has the duty to say what the law is. Now, that being said, more important than judicial review, Congress can pass legislation that makes it clear what the law is or changes the law. And then, at least in theory, except as we've seen with this Supreme Court, the courts at least are supposed to live within the guidelines of what Congress sets. So while I've long been bothered by judicial review, actually, I don't see how there's really a point to that. Now, she also says expanding the court. There I agree with her. And I have been saying since before the last election that we need to think about expanding the court if we have the votes we need in Congress. The Republicans have made an absolute mockery of the Supreme Court. And it's time for us to acknowledge what it has become, which is nothing more than a political body. And as such, we should treat it that way. As I've pointed out before, nowhere in the Constitution is it stated what size the court should be. And the size of the court has actually varied over time from between 5 and 10 members. So Congress certainly could pass legislation increasing the size of the court and allowing President Biden to appoint new justices. And my suggestion would be that they all be black women. Other suggestions that she made: repeal the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment is the piece of legislation that states that the federal government cannot spend money on abortions. It was named for a former Illinois congressman called Henry Hyde. And I totally agree with that idea. She also suggests hold floor votes codifying Griswold, Obergefell, Lawrence, Loving, etc., and to vote on Escobar's bill protecting clinics. I agree with every one of those suggestions. In fact, I'd go even further. There are many steps that Congress can take to try to protect people's rights. And at the forefront of that, I would say, protecting voting rights should be among them. But again, every one of those ideas requires action by Congress. Finally, expand education and access to Plan C. Well, there the administration is taking steps to do that, and is taking steps to make sure that people are able to safely cross state boundaries to obtain abortions and to get medicated abortions through the mail. So that addresses that whole list. And where in there is Biden not doing what would be helpful? Nowhere. So I would urge abortion rights activists to direct their ire where it belongs, which again are the Supreme Court, the Republicans in Congress and the legislatures who are either supporting anti-abortion legislation or blocking abortion rights legislation, and then Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, Susan Collins, who are standing in the way of eliminating the filibuster to address this issue. Because directing our anger anywhere else is not going to accomplish anything. And there is a solution to these three problems. What it is electing more Democrats. And even though President Biden has been criticized for making that point, he's right about that, actually. That is the solution. I mean, it's within our reach to be able to hold on to the House of Representatives and then pick up just a couple seats in the U.S. Senate. If I were a betting man, I'd say we're well positioned at this point to pick up seats in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, to name two. And I think the candidates who we have up in states such as New Hampshire, Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona are very strong candidates and are likely to be reelected as long as we turn out and vote. So there's real danger here in us directing our anger the wrong way and allowing our frustration to turn into a sense of helplessness. There is something we can do, and that's to organize and get out and vote. And if we do that, then that might get us the couple extra votes we need to actually accomplish something. Now, that being said, keeping in mind the story I told at the beginning of this video, I think Biden really does need to take some very visible steps just to show how upset he is and how he can relate to the frustration of these women who really are being once again essentially subjected to society-wide abuse. That's something that Joe Biden's actually really good at. He can do the whole Bill Clinton, I can feel your pain thing, and he needs to get out there and do that. But beyond that, all Democrats, all progressives, all people who care about abortion rights and about human rights generally need to stay laser focused on the problem. And the solution to that problem is electing more Democrats. Well, this battle over abortion rights has really been going on for some time. So why don't you check out this other video here that I recorded quite a while ago, talking about how the right wing have been setting the stage for this for some time. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.